if you're just now joining us, we're switching from Leslie to Steve Christensen. I think if you've been to any of our events or social media, you've seen the name Christensen. And I got to start with the most exciting stuff, which is the Christensen Family Foundation has agreed to match the first $10,000 that we raised today, which is huge. That's very, very powerful. And everybody contributes in their own ways, right? Leslie is out telling powerful, maybe painful stories. Christensens are always supportive there. Your wife has done some great stuff from a marketing perspective. I mean, all this stuff, but none of this really happens without the money. So first of all, thank you. Make sure you tell Dad.
I will.
How's Dad doing?
He's doing all right.
Is he
doing
good?
All right. You know, we're all getting a little older, but
yes, we are.
You know, this is still a cause that is very close to his heart.
Yeah.
So when I kind of consulted him, hey Dad, I'm going to this Helping Our Heroes thing. What do you think? You know, it's North Texas Giving Day. What do you think? And he did. You know, there were no hemming and hawing. It was like, do whatever you think is right.
Good.
So it's an easy decision for us.
Is Dad on Facebook?
He is on Facebook.
Is he? John Christensen, thank you very much. We appreciate everything you've done over the last several years. I mean, I have to look, but it's well over $100,000, and we do get matching on your contributions as well. So netted out, that's it's probably close to $250,000 just from the Christensen Family Foundation, Christensen Wealth Management, and the matching we get from that. So John, I hope you're watching, hope you're having a great day, and thanks for all you do for that. So just, I want to keep this pretty casual, and I want to talk a little bit about, I want to finish the story with your dad, because he was an Army veteran. We'll talk about that a little bit. Your experience at some of the events, at the galas and the golf tournaments, things like that. But let's start with you, first of all. So if you're not familiar with Steve, Steve is the Senior Financial Advisor on, I saw on your website you actually added Wilson to the name.
I did.
Not this Wilson, unfortunately, but you have a partner, Bradley Wilson, who's a fantastic human being as well.
Absolutely.
So they are Christensen Wilson Wealth Management. Private Wealth Management. I was focusing on adding the Wilson. So fantastic financial advisors out of the Crescent with Wells Fargo Advisors. And just a personal testimony, the gentleman that we were just talking about, Carl Fike, who was very much a father figure and a fellow Marine and just a person I cared about deeply. He asked about where he should go with his money, and I referred him to you, and you took exceptional care of him and are still taking care of his widow, Brenda, so thanks for that. And that's the biggest testimony I can give you. So let's talk, rewind the clock maybe 10 years to how you got introduced to Helping Our Heroes from the beginning.
Yeah. So obviously it was through you and Trip.
Yeah.
And, when I went back to my dad, my brothers, I mean, we kind of run the family foundation. I mean, my dad absolutely said, hey, this is something that's been on my mind. I didn't know really how to access it in a good way, and it was great that there was an affiliation with you and Trip, so it made it really easy. And I can just tell you that really hits at the heart of my dad, and it hits at the heart of, I know for me for sure, I can't speak necessarily to my brothers, but I'm humbled, first of all, just to be up here after hearing a story like you just told. And I said, I'm not sure I'm worthy to be up here with you guys, but I'm just happy that we're fortunate enough to give back. Because the sacrifices that you made and the gentleman that his story that he made, it's like there is no dollar figure that can pay that price. And I think we don't give enough credit to people like you that make the sacrifices. So I get to live this wonderful life that I live. And maybe I'm jumping forward out of some questions, but you talked about the golf tournaments and the galas. I get to go to plenty of galas, more than I probably would like, but I think the benefit of me going to a gala, more so the golf tournament, is I got to meet some of these guys.
Oh, yeah.
And to me, that made it real. That made it tangible. We can all sit and read history books, and it's all interesting. I'm kind of a history buff, and so is my dad in a big way. So it's all really interesting, but when you get to play golf with somebody that doesn't have any legs, and to see him go out there and to see the pain that he's in, and to see that he has to quit after 16 holes after not wanting to quit, you just see the sacrifices front and center, that people are making, and these are kids. I mean, I'm 55, and these guys are in their 20s and are giving their life up for me and my family, and the freedoms that I think sometimes we get too comfortable and take, maybe not seriously enough. This is a good reminder for me that we're not a perfect country, but we're a pretty damn good country, and that's because of the sacrifices that people make. And we all need a reminder of that.
So, first of all, you talk about like why I don't give. Everybody else does things. Everybody deals. Well, not everybody. I would assume a lot of people deal with I'm not giving enough, and even the guys that come home from overseas are like I wish I'd have re-enlisted. I wish I'd have done another tour. I mean, it's like there's something in many of us that's like I wish I could do something else. And don't let that deter or diminish what you actually do. I mean, quite literally, without the financial support of your family, this wouldn't have got off the ground, right? So this is you are uber critical to this. And in church, they talk about time, talent, treasure, right? Some people have time, some people have talent, some people have treasure, and whatever you have, be humble with what you have and what you give. So thanks, seriously. Number two, you talked about the, playing golf. I assume you're talking about Winnie. Is that the one there?
I mean, Winnie and
no, that's his name, Steve Winnie.
Winnie, but really it was the first gentleman that I met, Hispanic kid. I got to play with his brother and his dad. And he was the first one I ever got to play with. And, the kid didn't have any legs, and he was talking to me about phantom pain and all of this stuff. I have a brother that's a neurosurgeon, so I know, theoretically about phantom pain, but I got to see it firsthand. And I saw this kid that had no legs, but yet he still had pain. And I saw he was so determined to finish that round, even with all of the pain. And so, it just made it super real. Winnie, I appreciate playing with him because he's a really good golfer. But again, it's so humbling to me that I could see he's got a little hitch and he never wanted to talk about it. So I said, "Hey, Winnie, what's up?" And he said, "Well, I got shrapnel here and on my left leg." And I'm like, "Gosh, if this guy can be the golfer that he is, and he's got shrapnel in him, I need to be a better golfer." But just to hear his stories. And it's not like he's bragging about them. I kind of have to pull it out of him a little bit. But just to hear his stories and the risks that he took to protect our country, it's I'm just amazed.
It's amazing people. So we are talking about some of the events in the galas, and we had mentioned this previously. I'm going to mention it again. We try to have like two types of speakers. One is a higher-ranking officer. We talked about General Amos with Leslie when he came and spoke, 35th Commandant of the Marine Corps, and then we have a young injured Marine or soldier that comes and speaks and kind of tells the story. And there's a lot of reasons to have those guys speak. One is so I don't like the word privilege nowadays, but the people like us that are very blessed to be able to hear like, holy moly, this guy's going through phantom pain or he's burn all over his body. So it's a really good humbling experience and reminder to be able to come to the gala and see what other people are going through. And we've seen a trend recently with our kind of the flock or the donors, if you will, starting to bring their next generation. And I did this accidentally. I started bringing my kids early on because I didn't have any babysitters. So poor Georgie and Hannah have been coming to these events for 10 years, but now as teenagers, and Georgie is 20, their experience and their comments and their outlook on life is a lot different by seeing what this is. And so I do yourself a favor and do maybe your kids a favor if it's the right age to bring them out to one of these galas and see what it's like for what these heroes have gone through. It's very, very powerful as Steve was talking about. The other thing I'll mention, we're talking about the gala, which is a fantastic event. And we mentioned this before, I want to keep reminding everybody, the gala for 2021 is going to be the Saturday before or the Saturday after Veterans Day, so make sure that you join us for that. The golf event, we had mentioned Carl before, Carl Fight, our buddy that we lost. We are renaming the golf tournament for the spring of 2021. It's going to be played at Las Colinas Country Club, in large part because it's a fantastic course. It's completely redone, and Carl is somewhat of folklore out there. He spent a lot of time out there. So the Carl Cup, as we're now calling it, is going to be the spring of 2021, Las Colinas Country Club. We'll get you a date on that, so you can make sure to join us for that. The other thing that I want to mention, where I'm talking about all the different events, would be going back to your generosity with the matching. We did talk to our CPA to make sure that this was all kosher, but you can make contributions now, and we'll give you the foursome or the table at the gala later. So for as little as $1,500, you can buy your table and your foursome, all that stuff together, and then the Christensen Family Foundation is going to match that today as well. So please help us take advantage of this $10,000 of matching gifts from the Christensen Family Foundation to make sure that we can maximize this and help our heroes a lot. Okay, so can we go back to Dad for a second?
Absolutely.
So I don't know much of his story. He comes every year, he sits up front, and we talk, and he's just a guy that I've fallen in love with. I didn't even know he was in the Army until you mentioned that a couple years ago.
Yeah. So he's got a great story, and I guess I'll lose a little bit of my modesty here to just kind of tell you his story, because I think it's a fantastic story, and it's all about the American dream. So he was born in Denmark. He was born in 1940, and his father was a really good boxer, and he was the middleweight champion, amateur middleweight champion of Europe at the time. And because of that, his father got to travel to America. You know, when my dad was a kid, he didn't get to go with him, or maybe it was even before my dad was born. I don't know the timeline on it. So he got to see what America was all about.
Yeah.
And there was no ifs, ands, or buts. He was moving his family to America because it was a land of opportunity.
Yeah.
So then Second World War broke out. Well, they had applied before the war broke out. And once the war broke out, they shut that down.
Okay.
So once the war was over, they had to get back in line and register to come over. They had to find a sponsor, and they found a sponsor, another Danish family in San Francisco.
Okay.
So in 1950, he got to come through Ellis Island.
Wow.
Came with absolutely nothing. I think at the time, as my dad tells the story, you were allowed to bring through $50 in value. So he brought through, he and his family, some silverware that he's kind of gifted to the kids now that have a lot of meaning. Obviously, that's where it all started.
Yeah.
And he talks about taking the bus, you know, once they finally land in America, Ellis Island, they register them.
Yeah.
They take a bus all the way across America.
To San Francisco?
To San Francisco.
Because that other family was there?
Yeah.
Okay.
That sponsored, because at the time you had to have somebody that I think would take financial responsibility for you. So anyway, he's got this great story where it started from nothing. It started with a dream. And so then after he finishes high school, he and his buddy, Chaz, decides that they're going to, you know, go in the military, go in the Army.
Yeah.
And so as luck would have it, he gets stationed in Germany.
Okay.
Babenhausen, Germany, where he meets my mother.
Okay.
Who's German.
Okay.
And so they decide to get married. He brings her back, and you know, she becomes a citizen. Fast forward, they have 3 kids. But I think what's also important about the story to me is that my dad became a driver for United Parcel Service. He started going to college, and they had kids maybe a little bit too early. And
where are they living at the time?
So we're living in, I was born in LA.
Okay.
So he had to start earning some money, so he decides to become a driver for United Parcel Service.
Okay.
Which college becomes a driver.
Okay.
So
Driving the big brown truck.
the big brown truck.
Okay.
Okay. And so he starts there. He never goes back to college, and just through hard work, he works his way up through the ranks. And as he'll tell the story, my mother would tell the story, he had to take a big pay cut, to move from a driver to management. And my mom was going, "Well, that doesn't sound right."
Yeah.
So he made a sacrifice to get into management, and through management, he was given the opportunity to start accumulating shares, and through his life, just through hard work, dedication, he worked his way up into what I would call upper middle management. Helped open up, coincidentally, Germany was the first international expansion that UPS ever went to, was in Germany. And so they sent him over there to kind of help open it up. So, really the moral of the story is the American dream was there then. I still believe it's here today.
Yeah.
And, but it's not anything that's going to be given to you. You have to earn it just like you did back then. You got to make sacrifices, and maybe if there's parallels, it's not, I wouldn't say it's on par with the sacrifices that veterans make, but he made sacrifices, and I lived in 12 different houses before I graduated from high school, so I thought that was normal. I mean, we moved around so he could move up in the ranks, but really it was just all about hard work, dedication, doing what's right. And, he was fortunate enough, and maybe to kind of tie all this together, he's like, man, I got to give back in a way, because I couldn't have in my wildest dream, fathomed where I'm at today and the success I've had financially, and I feel like I got to give back. Sorry, sons, but I'm going to give some of this away.
Darn it!
So, anyway, I just thought, man, that is so cool. That he's not, he doesn't, I think he's modest about it. I think, this is really about his grit and his hard work, but part of it's luck. Yeah. And so he wants to give it back. And so one of the ways that we give back is, to helping our heroes, along with, some other cool causes. So,
that's an awesome story about Dad, and we could all do that, right? You talk about going from driver to management and taking the pay cut, and the wife going, what the hell? I guess it's mom going, what the hell? We all need to have a little bit of a longer view, right? If you look at what's going on in the country today, people are so emotional about what's going on right now, but we need to make sure that we have a longer view with that, and the longer view actually is a good way to start talking about Christensen Wilson, what's it called now, private wealth management. And your dad, if I could use the words, I would say maybe he went from financial success to financial significance, and I know personally from working with you and referring Carl and all that type of stuff that your group is exceptional at taking people from financial success to financial significance and making their life meaningful. So can you tell us a couple things? One is, what makes y'all a little bit different than other financial advisors? And number two, I've read a lot of this tagline of yours called the ultimate client experience. Can you expand on either one of those?
Yeah, I think what we do maybe a little bit differently than most people, and it kind of comes to the life lessons that maybe I learned from my dad, is that you start with a plan. Success is not all about luck, it's about a plan. Okay. And so before we ever invest any client's money, we start with a plan. There's no strings attached. We said we'll take you through our process. If you see that we can add value after going through this process, we can engage in a relationship. If you don't see the value that we can add, you can go your own way, and there's no cost. So it really comes down to, let's start with a plan, and then let me define the value that I think that we can add.
Okay.
And so that, I think, is a little bit different than the way most people handle it. And really, I always say we're plan-centric.
Okay.
And a relationship, we always say, goes both ways. And we're fortunate at this time in our careers that we want to do business with people that, first of all, appreciate what we do and that are going to be engaged in our process.
Take the advice.
Because again, success, in relationships takes two parties. And so we really try to emphasize that to try to find the right type clients kind of up front. So we do a lot of the heavy lifting up front.
Yeah.
So when we get into a situation like COVID-19 or the Great Recession, we've got a plan.
Right.
We have got a plan. So, I'm sure our clients in a way are scared, but I think they're less scared, particularly those that have been with us through 08 and through 01. They're just like, hey, we trust you guys, do what you do.
We've done this before.
So maybe that's what makes us a little bit different, and that, the ultimate client experience in this day and age, you've got so many, what I would call kind of robo responses, this, that, and the other thing. You call a 1-800 number and you're on hold forever. And to me, this, the one thing that we can control, as we always say, is client service. So man, let's do our best just to make clients feel important and make sure that we respond to their needs in a timely fashion. We can differentiate ourselves by just doing the simple things like that. That's not complicated. Returning somebody's phone call within 24 hours to me is pretty simple, but it's actually a differentiator.
Well, good for you. There's not a lot of competition, right?
So, anyways, having a plan, client service, and I've been doing this for 33 years. It's kind of hard for me to believe. When I look back at my dad's career, I think he worked at UPS for 35. And he worked for one company for his whole life. I've worked for one company my whole life. But you start to better understand, what's important. And I always say, we're not in this to chase a hot dot or whatever, the fangs that are going to, outperform for a certain period of time and then could blow you up longer term. It's about, kind of having a plan. So.
All right, so a couple more things. We touched on this a little bit with Leslie, but and I talked to you soon after this, but my dad died in October, and I was given the advice of have these conversations with him. And so I quite literally sat in the hospital room and recorded conversations with him. And I started asking pretty generic questions like, how'd you meet mom, and blah, blah, blah. And then it got to pretty deep stuff like, you have any regrets or what advice you'd give? And I kind of packaged all that stuff together, life lessons. So I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you for some life lessons. First, with your financial advisor hat on, what advice would you give kind of different stages of life? So think of the younger person now. Maybe they just got out of college. They're probably struggling to find a job, or maybe they just got their first real job. So financially, what should young people be thinking about? And then we'll ask the same question for maybe middle of your life and then your retirement.
I think you mentioned it earlier, is, we got to start taking a longer term view. And I'm going to sound like an old guy here, but I think we're in kind of this I want it now kind of mindset. I'm going to blame Amazon. I mean, I can order something that's on my front porch. But I think we need to think longer term, and I'm going to take this back to my dad. I saw how he accumulated his wealth, and literally 30% of every paycheck that he ever earned was put into stock.
Is that right?
It wasn't 30%. Wow. It wasn't, am I going to do it this month? Am I not going to do it next month? It was every month. Come hell or high water. That's what he did. And so, maybe it's not so easy for everybody to do, but just starting that discipline, whether it's $50 a month, whether you can afford $100. I'm sure you've seen the charts that people that put money into an IRA when they're 20 to 30 and stop when they're 30, are wealthier than the people that start at 30 and do it to 59 and a half.
Yeah.
It's about the compounding of the money. So if you just get the discipline early, it doesn't have to be super significant. You don't have to starve.
Yeah.
But just having that discipline earlier and having a longer term view, because there's going to be noise, all along the way. But if you have a plan, you stick to that plan, it's amazing the wealth that can be built over time.
Yeah.
Just having that
Yeah,
discipline.
the snowball effect, right? Yep.
Yeah.
So if you're young, take advantage of time, get that snowball effect. I think, did Einstein say the seventh wonder of the world was compounding?
I think so.
Yeah, we'll go with that one. So take advantage of it. Just do a little bit, get in the habit. And so your dad worked 35 years. I'm assuming he started, so he's got to retire 60 or earlier?
He retired at 55, and I'm 55 now, and that was always my goal, to retire at 55, but that's...
Even when?
I like what I'm doing. I've got young kids.
Yeah.
I plan on doing this for a while.
Okay.
Yeah.
So would you change that advice for somebody kind of middle of their career and or near retirement? Advice?
Well, I can just tell you that the client conversations that we have for, maybe people more of my age, it's really about defining what's important, and maybe my age is a little bit young, but our clients are in their 60s and 70s. It's interesting how their mindset changes. It's not about a number per se anymore. It's about their legacy, and what we really try to dig into, when you're not around anymore, what do you want your story to be?
Yeah.
And help define that. Whether that's creating a college fund for your grandchildren, whether that's doing an annual family trip to just stay connected, whether that's setting up an endowment for helping our heroes, whatever it is. And to me, after doing this for 33 years, that's where I find the most satisfaction.
It's awesome.
Is helping clients do these things that they thought they could never do.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure my dad in his wildest dreams never thought that he could set up a family foundation and give money away to all of these great causes.
Yeah.
So helping clients do these things that they never thought that they would be able to do, and have the accountability and the tracking to make it happen, and just see it, to me, at this point in my career, that's where I get the most satisfaction.
Cool. That's really cool. That's the term I stole from somebody else, success to significance.
Yeah.
You get to live that every day.
Yeah.
So you're like, I don't do much. I'm sitting here with a GoPro, in an empty room. You're changing the world, buddy. So thanks for doing that. All right, so a couple things I want to close out here with. Number one, the American dream is still alive. Still alive and going. That's a fantastic story about Dad. So thanks, John, for your example and your generosity to helping our heroes, especially the matching gift that that we're announcing today, the $10,000 of matching funds of anything that we raise today. So please do that. I'll also mention, which I think I said before you got in the room, that another one of our partners, Divine Floral and Gifts. So do you buy flowers for Lauren?
I do occasionally.
Okay,
Yes.
better kick it up. So Divine Florals and Gifts out of Arlington, Texas. You may know their son Brent is our CPA. He's on the board. He's friends with Tripp and all that other stuff. So the Snyder family is going to do 10% of anything that gets purchased today goes directly to helping our heroes. They made those two beautiful flower arrangements that we're going to put on a couple grave sites of our buddies that we were talking about. So we head out to the cemetery after this and do that. So that's one. Thanks, John. Thanks to all the Christiansons and their family for the matching for the years. It's been over a decade since you all have joined us and started making contributions. So thanks for the decade plus of financial support. If you have any financial questions about the markets or how to convert your financial success to financial significance, or just want financial peace of mind, Steve and Bradley are the team to do that for you. I can say that because I've done it. The people that I trusted and respected a lot in this business, I know thousands of financial advisors, and they are arguably the best team out there for you. So make sure you reach out to them. What's your website?
So it's CW, I'm not sure.
Should know that one.
We'll be sure to link it correctly.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll put their link on?
It's on my business card. I don't have it on me, so.
So that tells you, you know, you're not the marketing machine. You are genuine. You are a genuine man who cares about helping other people. So that's fantastic. So do that. Please go to helpingourheroes.us. Hit the donate button. You can donate through our Facebook page. Obviously, and anything that gets documented today. Steve and John and the generous people at the Christensen Family Foundation are going to match up to $10,000 a day, which is just fantastic. So with that, Steve, thank you very much for everything you've done.
Thanks for having me.
And thanks for joining us, buddy. We appreciate you.